Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first ISAC HIPAA Program webinar on HIPAA compliance vendors. My name is Beth Manley, and I am ISAC's Compliance Officer. We also have with us today Sarah Barrett from Henry County, Don Minster from Rolling Hills Community Services Region, Michelle Fields from Greene County, and Brian Blodgett from County Social Services Region. So we'll start with a little bit of information about the webinar. HIPAA compliance can be overwhelming at times, and sometimes you don't know where to start. Some counties and regions have hired someone to help with their HIPAA compliance. Vendors that help with HIPAA compliance vary from in-person consultants to online programs. Services and prices vary greatly between the vendors. You should reach out to the vendor directly if you have any questions about specific services they offer or the prices of their services. Sometimes prices vary based on the size of your entity or the number of office locations you have. Typically, online programs will be a little bit cheaper than consultants that come into your office, but again, it's best to reach out to the vendor if you have specific questions about that. Now for our webinar. We have 4 counties and regions with us today, and they are going to share information about their work with different HIPAA compliance vendors. The intent is for the panelists to provide firsthand information about their experiences with third-party vendors. This will give you an idea about why they decided to hire a compliance vendor and the time and effort it takes them to stay compliant. We are going to wait and take questions at the end of the webinar, but you can go ahead and submit them through the webinar software at any time during the program. But we're going to wait to the end to answer them. And remember, if you want to direct them towards a specific panelist to mention them in your questions. It'll just make it run a little smoother. All right, here's a list of the questions that each of the panelists will answer. Each county and region will give a summary of their answers. Not all of the questions are applicable to each county and region based on the type of the vendor they work with, but they will answer the questions that apply to their own situation. Also, not everyone in the panel is in the same stage of HIPAA compliance, so the answers might vary based on that as well. Some people are done with the risk assessment. Some people, actually I'm not sure if everybody has started, but they'll go ahead and tell you that. So here are the questions that will be answered. The first one, how did you come to the conclusion to hire a third-party vendor to help with HIPAA compliance? What kind of vendor are you using? Is it an online program or an in-person consultant? How long have you been working with your vendor? What was the process for the risk assessment? And they should touch on things such as the time they spent on it, format of the risk assessment, number of meetings, were the meetings in person or on a conference call? Was there any outside work the county or region had to complete outside of meeting with the vendor? Was someone available to answer questions throughout the process if it was an online program? Next question, how much time did you spend going through the remediation plan? Did the vendor completely rewrite your policies and procedures, or did they modify the ones you are currently using? And for online vendors, were sample policies and procedures provided? How much time did you spend working on HIPAA compliance outside of working with your vendor? This could include things such as training, modifying policies, documenting compliance, anything like that. And finally, what are some of the challenges you've come across throughout the process? So each of the panelists will just give a summary of all of those questions. And remember, if you have more questions, go ahead and submit them throughout the webinar. So first we have Sarah Barrett with Henry County, and she is using Croche Compliance Solutions, and their consultant is Roger Schindel. So I will hand it over to Sarah now.
Good morning. For question number 1, I felt that ISAC had been very helpful with giving the county resources to become compliant. However, I felt that the county needed someone who could come in and look at our specific compliance efforts and give us direction on what still needed to be accomplished. The county also needed to make sure that the high-tech electronic record part of HIPAA was addressed, and Croche could complete that for us. Staff have completed, their staff have completed a 5-year certification process as well. So I felt that that was very helpful in gauging their knowledge base and the support that they could give us. On question number 2, the vendor is through in-person consultation, over the phone, online GoToMeeting, and then they have web-based storage for us called the HIPAA Suite, where our specific information is stored. Question number 3, we've been working with them for about a year now. The vendor also is contracted with a few other counties in our region, and they're contracted as the HIPAA compliance entity for our region as well. So that made working together for region compliance and the county compliance a smooth process for those of us that were already using Karosh. Question number 4. The vendor came to Henry County to meet in person with all the department heads and to complete the risk assessment. I met with the provider twice, and our IT staff met with the provider twice. The vendor also gave an in-person overview training to all of the county department heads, and then when they were doing the remediation plan and the risk assessment, they did go to each department and talk with those departments to identify if they should be ruled in or ruled out of our HIPAA umbrella. Question number 5, I spent probably 5 or 6 hours working on the remediation plan, and our IT staff has probably spent about 2 hours. Question number 6, the provider reviewed a copy of our current HIPAA policy, and then currently we're building the new updated HIPAA policy one section at a time. We review the templates together. I can see the documents on the computer screen, and they've also been sent to me prior to our GoToMeeting time. And then we're talking through the content on the phone. Then I update the sections to reflect our actual practice. I track changes on the document. I electronically sign the section, and then I return those by email to the vendor. Number 7. I spend a couple hours a month on HIPAA right now. Once the policy manual is complete, the provider will provide an initial HIPAA training to the county departments, and then will provide me with the training to maintain the ongoing training process. I've done a couple of trainings for our newly hired staff that fall under HIPAA as well. Question number 8, coordinating time with the IT staff to meet with the vendor to complete their section of the HIPAA policy was kind of a challenge, trying to get the schedules coordinated and make time to meet with Roger. We've also had some confusion on HIPAA as it pertains to employee HR files, but those have been the 2 most significant glitches that we've done. And if Dawn Menser is ready, I'm ready to hand it off to her.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Our region started looking into vendors to complete our HIPAA compliance approximately a year and a half ago. And we came to the conclusion that it was essential for us to have a third-party vendor because HIPAA is a very complicated law, and the potential fines and penalties for so much that we felt that tapping into someone's expertise and certification in HIPAA and the privacy rules was essential for our region. We also realized that the potential for a breach is much greater within the scope of a regional system, and wanted a vendor that could identify all of the gaps and close those for us. We are using an in-person consultant, Gary Jones, who's with Midwest Compliance Associates based out of Cedar Falls. We were very pleased in the fact that we wanted someone here locally in Iowa who really understood mental health, because we felt that that was very important to us in our selection process. Gary is providing phone consultation as well as coming out to our region and meeting with us on a regular basis, and he also utilizes GoToMeetings, which are really pretty useful for us because of the proximity and location from our vendor to our region. We're able to connect by utilization of GoToMeetings whenever we need to sort through issues. What we liked about the in-person consultant is having someone who can take the time to get to know how our operation works and look at where protected health information resides and how best to protect it. Our vendor was hired about 6 months ago, and for the first few months that we started working with Gary Jones, he was providing template forms and policies for us to review and look over and tweak it to the needs of our region. And so for question number 4, we're really new in the process. We are just starting our risk assessment. And since we work as part of several different counties, the security risk assessment entails looking at the systems of multiple counties. And each of the county IT professionals is completing a security risk assessment questionnaire, the result of which will be a risk profile report identifying required specifications that need to be addressed. And one of the first things our consultant did was to ask us a lot of questions about how we operated, where PHI might reside within our organization, and how we can work in an effort to identify those potential areas of risk. We are not to the point of a remediation plan yet, but yet Gary has assured us that he is going to be completing that process for us. And as far as number 6, rewriting our policies and procedures, we were utilizing the ISAC policies, which were very detailed, and the vendor rewrote our policies to make them more concise and easier for us as a region to understand, because his thought was that if your policies are difficult to understand, they're also going to be difficult to follow. So they were streamlined and condensed down to a workable level for our region. But yet they do meet the compliance measures that we need. And as far as my involvement in providing HIPAA compliance and working with our vendor, it's been very minimal outside of the regular meetings. He has taken the lead on all of this process. It's been really effortless on our part. We feel it was a very good investment to ensure that we are compliant as a region, and we have really not run into any challenges. The only thing that I can think of is getting old procedures changed. An example of that would be trying to convince staff that we need to utilize CSN for our electronic record keeping versus continuing to store paper claims, which is really not necessary. It's a duplication, but those are just old processes that we need to break down. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Fields with Greene County, who is using the compliancy group, the GUARD.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Michelle Fields with Greene County, and we have been using the GUARD for just over a year. And prior to that, we had been with the program through ISAC for about a year, and our HIPAA committee was trying to go through kind of a combination of the existing policies that we had from, I think, 1994, and combine those with what we saw from ISAC. And it seemed like every time our committee met, we walked away with more questions than we had answers. And we were getting very frustrated, feeling like we weren't making any progress. And it was maybe at one of the ISAC fall or spring schools, we saw a presentation from Jasper County who had been using the compliancy group as well, and thought that might be something worth us looking into. So we did, and like I said, we've been with them for just over a year. They are an online-based vendor, and we meet with them kind of the same as everybody else through the go-to meetings that we can schedule ourselves through a calendar function that they have. Typically, after the end of each meeting, our contact person, whose name is Bob, will set up a meeting for us at that time, but we have found pretty regularly that the goals he set for us end up being unattainable. We just can't quite get through all of the policies or get all of our homework done in the time that he gives us, but it's good that he gives us a deadline so that we know that we can make working through HIPAA a priority. The process for our risk assessment, they have 3 Excel spreadsheets that have a bunch of questions on them, and you just go through and answer the yes or no. as far as looking at both IT security and there was a IT risk analysis and then a physical site audit. And the physical site was just our staff, our HIPAA committee walking around and, clicking, checking yes or no on each of the spreadsheet questions. And then the IT risk analysis was me answering as many questions as I could, as I was able, and then reaching out to IT staff in other counties to help me answer some of the more technical questions that I didn't have the answers to. Let me see, I'm reading my questions, make sure I'm answering them. Number of meetings. When we first started with the compliancy group, we met once every 2 weeks, and during that time, we were given templates of the HIPAA policies, and he would give us homework of 3 or 4 at a time that we would need to read through, see how they worked with how we do things in Greene County, make modifications to them, and then upload them back into the GARD. And then as time went on, then we would meet more like monthly, and that's where we're at now, is meeting monthly. As far as going through remediation plans, we're still working through them. A lot of the places where we needed remediation have been resolved simply by having a policy in place. Some of them were more involved making sure the server room was locked at all times, and changed how we were dealing with documents that had to be shredded. So some of those we changed right away. Other ones were kind of waiting till we get all of our plans have all been, our policies have all been approved. We're finishing training for the HIPAA committee, and then we're going to be moving on to training for the rest of the county staff. So we rewrote our policies ourselves with help from the compliancy group. If we had questions about what a policy meant, or did we really need it, they were always really quick to offer up examples of places where policies had not been followed, or the policy had been slightly modified, and how that got entities into trouble. Outside of working with my vendor, our HIPAA committee has spent time, I would say, putting the final review on our policies and accepting our training has been taken about 4 hours. I've probably given another, and this would be in a year, probably another 20 hours towards the IT security side of things. Challenges that we've come across throughout the process, 2 biggies. One would be, probably the first one is squeezing time for HIPAA into our schedules, making it a priority to keep moving forward with it, and having a vendor nipping at your heels, giving you homework has been very helpful for us. The other challenge that we had was getting one of our vendors that has our real estate and accounting software to sign a business associate agreement. And we struggled with that for a while, and while they haven't signed our actual business associate agreement, there is an addendum to their contract now that we think would be acceptable. And the other thing I would add, one of the conclusions we came, one of the reasons we decided to move forward with a vendor was not just getting the policies written and implemented, but looking at all of the tracking that had to be done, keeping track of who's taken training, and retention of documents, and recording incidences, and it just seemed a little overwhelming trying to keep track of all of that. And we found a really good fit with the GARD, and that they were able to provide us with all of that information, or at least provide us with a place to store and track all of that information. So that's it for the GARD. I will now turn this over to Brian Blodgett, who's with County Social Services, and he uses Helix Security.
So, hello everyone. Brian Blodgett here. thanks for inviting me to this webinar. For Helix Security, I guess as far as the questions and how we did things, kind of went about it a little bit different in that as far as why did we need a third-party vendor, I actually came from the financial sector, and so I've actually done a lot of compliance work around the GLBA and actual information security programs in financial sectors. So when I came to County Social Services, myself was designated the Information Security Officer, and Sheila Kabliska was designated as the Privacy Officer. We sat down and literally spent a couple days going through where County Social Services was, and actually took a lot of the templates I had on the security side from the financial sector and applied them to County Social Services, as well as Sheila brought several privacy items. We put together a basic policy, and then what we did is we realized that we needed some help. And so we called in Helix Security. They're actually out of Madison, South Dakota. And they came in and actually had them do a full information security audit for us. And so basically that was the process. And so they did an audit, and we engaged them to do that with the understanding that they'd audit what we had built, and then from there, here's the next steps. And so, and ultimately engaged us in that direction. And it's so far worked out very well. The vendor is actually both in-person and an online program. The in-person part of it is they actually come on site annually and do the actual audit process, actually looking through to make sure that we have compliance on it. They help us with the adequacy side of it by actually making sure that the policy meets the law, and then come on site and actually help us out with verifying that we're doing the things that we say it should be doing. As far how long we've been with this vendor, we originally engaged them early in 2014 is when, so it's been about 2.5 years at this time that we've been working with them. The actual process for the risk assessment is actually, they have an online program called Track. And Track actually allows you to take and enter your information assets, assign threats against them, and then ultimately risk assess and get a quantitative risk assessment number. What I really like about that from the risk assessment process is that they allow us to actually get a number. While it's just a relative number, you can see here's the highest risk items, here's the lowest risk items, so that when we're making decisions, we can actually make risk-based decisions to say, this is the highest risk item, we should probably spend more money here, as opposed to, yeah, that's neat, but it really doesn't help any from a risk standpoint. And also allows us, when we report to the CSS board, hey, here is where we're at risk assessment wise, this is why we feel we should be spending money here as opposed to this. You know, so that's really helped in a lot of ways on the IT side of things as well. As far as time going through the remediation plan, ultimately we meet once a month. We've been meeting once a month as as a HIPAA committee with several stakeholders. There's 8 of us on the committee throughout the region. We meet in a GoToMeeting webinar, and we actually go through and talk through various items. So we spend at least an hour or 2 a month meeting as a group, and then between myself and or Sheila, we spend another probably another half a day a month just dealing with different items that come up, follow-up type items. The other piece that we do annually that myself and Sheila do is we do an internal audit. We between the 2 of us, we go around and visit every county office and go through a checklist of items that kind of help us out with reassessing the risk assessment, that continual assessment process, as well as just touch base to make sure things that haven't changed and or answer questions. A lot of times it's a good just-in-time training thing too. Did the vendor completely rewrite the policies? Actually, yeah, I'm glad I called them in, because the policies that we brought in were basically came down to they were good, but hey, here's some things missing when you look at this from a high-tech act, as well as some of the changes in HIPAA. So we ultimately, our policies have a lot of the ISAC policies built into them, with some modifications that that Helix helped us work out that really fit our region more, that we're still compliant. As far as how much time do you spend working on HIPAA compliance outside of working with your vendor, I spent probably half a day to a day is what Sheila and I each spend working on different things a month, one way or the other, dealing with either dealing with an incident where, hey, you know, so-and-so emailed so-and-so and addressing it, or just updating different documentation as the region changes. As far as challenges in the process, you know, being a 22 county region, it's 22 ish offices, and making sure that all those offices fall under the same umbrella. Varying degrees of IT support and policies at those counties. So just working with each county on that, which I tell you, the counties have been great for it. It's just a lot of counties. So that's really the biggest thing in the process, is just going through that. So I guess that being said, I will throw it back to you there, Beth.
Okay, well, we did get some questions. The first one is contact information for different vendors, and I should have included this but didn't. I will either add the information to the slides and we'll post them along with the recorded webinar, or we'll just have a separate document with all of their contact information, but they will be provided. And then the second one is, if all of the panelists would answer this one, do any of the regions and counties still use ISAC, or are they only using their vendors? So are you still part of the ISAC HIPAA program, or have you just switched completely and just are working with a vendor?
This is Michelle.
Want to go in order, Beth?
Yeah, we can go ahead and go in order. That would probably be easiest. So start with Sarah.
Okay, so this is Sarah, and yes, we do still use ISAC. So we have both our agreement with ISAC, and we use the services that they provide, and then we have our contract with Karosh as well.
And this is Dawn, and we had a contract with ISAC for the first 2 years that the region was in effect, and then when we hired Gary Jones, we did not renew our contract for this year with ISAC.
This is Michelle Fields. We used the ISAC program for the first year, and we've been with the compliance group since then.
And this is Brian Blodgett, and ISAC has still been a great resource. I know Sheila on the privacy side has definitely asked many questions and been very helpful. So yes, we use both.
Okay, and I think there's one more question, and Tammy's going to go ahead and read that. And then remember to keep submitting questions if you have any.
There's a question submitted. Those of you who talk about the IT risk assessment side of things, do any of you who are a county versus a region use solutions and have a contract with them for IT? Would the vendor need to do a risk assessment of solutions to make sure they take care of the HIPAA side of things? How does having an outside vendor, in this situation solutions, for IT fall into your HIPAA policy and risk assessment?
So for county with Karosh, what Karosh does, we have the business associate agreement with Solutions, and part of that agreement states that they're compliant with HIPAA as well. And then for now, Karosh is reaching out to all of our business associate agreements to test their compliance with HIPAA and how that would impact us. So that's how we interface with Solutions and using our vendor to compliance check for us.
This is Brian Blodgett here. The track program that Helix has what they call a vendor management module, which allows you to actually risk assess the vendor and ultimately, same idea, get a score so that you can set a threshold and say that this vendor is doing this, and this, or has this, and this, therefore they meet our standard. And so, again, that's what I like about that track, is it gives us this raw number, and I like numbers, so thank you.
Okay, so the next one is, will the recording be, I guess, where will the recording be? We're going to put it on the ISAC website, so it'll be available to everyone. I've gotten a lot of questions about this from program members and non-program members, and so I thought it would be really helpful for it to be available to everyone. And I realized that there are a lot of meetings going on Tuesday mornings, so we'll avoid this time in the future, but it'll be available to everyone on the ISAC website. Are there any more questions? Okay, well, I have a little bit of information. I wanted to, I wanted to give some information about the ISAC HIPAA program, just especially because we got a question about it. So there is, the ISAC HIPAA program and third-party vendors are two different programs. So the ISAC HIPAA program is meant to be more of an educational resource, and we can answer general questions. Typically, they're more specific, general but specific questions. And so we have monthly webinars. We also have a general HIPAA information webinar that will be coming up. I think it's normally in October or November, but we need to coordinate that, and we'll give you more information later. And then we've started monthly webinars like the one we're doing now, and then I have some more information about that actually. The next one's going to be about HIPAA risk assessments, and it will be in early October. So initially they were going to be monthly webinars, but it's a little slow getting speakers set up, and so to start off with, they're going to be every other month, and then we will slowly work into having them every month. But here are some of the topics that we will be addressing. So HIPAA risk assessment, employee HIPAA training. A lot of people don't know what information non-healthcare providers need to know, so just the general office staff versus people who use CSN. And then some more information about business associates, cybersecurity, and breach reporting. Some other things that the program is good for is if a specific question comes up. So if you want a little bit more information about if you think you've had a breach, you can contact us and give us, and we can guide you on what to do. So first step, go through the breach risk assessment just to see what the likelihood that PHI was improperly disclosed. We'll help you with things like that. But what we won't do is things like go through all of your policies and procedures and make sure that they match your current business process. So those things are great for third-party vendors because they'll go through your policies and procedures with you. I think there are several counties that are part of both the ISAC HIPAA program and have their own third-party vendor, but it just depends on your needs and your budget. Sometimes you don't want to pay for two programs. So it really just depends on you and what your program needs are. I think that's about all the information I have. Are there any? It doesn't look like there's any more questions. So if something comes up, feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to address any of those questions. And we will be posting the webinar along with the vendor contact information if you have questions for them. Thank you for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.